take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. My name is Christopher Brown. I'm a behavioral analyst with ABBA. I've been a behavioral analyst for about 2 years now, coming up on my second year. I've been in the field for almost 11 years. So tonight I'm clinical director of ABBA also. Just put that out there, I guess. That we're going to be looking at the functions of behavior and how that relates to appropriate behaviors and challenging behaviors that people may see. Ryan is over there in Texas, and I will send it off to him so he can introduce himself.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm Ryan Murphy. I'm here in Texas and live here in Fort Worth, not too far from Northwest ISD. And I'm just working here in Texas trying to build ABHA and setting a foundation. We've been just primarily reaching our local community, giving as much as possible with these kind of webinars and information just to spread, positive vibes all around the community, and also just to give of ourselves and make sure that we're in the community and sharing every possible resource that we can in order to build something sustainable here. So thank you all for joining in. I'm going to be manning the PowerPoint and fielding the chat. Feel free to chime in if you have any questions, and we can pose them up to Chris, or whoever would like to answer. So again, thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
And we also have Miss Cook, who is a behavioral analyst for the district as well. She's just kind of here to see what we have to offer, and if she wants to provide any input, she's more than welcome to as well. All right. So moving forward, Mr. Ryan, can you change the slide for me, friend? There we go. Okay, so introductions. I believe we've done all this. My grade level, I guess you'd say, is that I've worked with individuals from 2 to 62, pretty much. I've worked in homes, I've worked within the school districts, I've worked in clinical-based services. I've kind of have a wide spectrum, but me being a taller male, I have been put primarily with adolescent males who exhibit challenging behaviors with low vocal abilities or lower vocal abilities. So I have extensive experience working on functional communication training, MAN training, or requesting things. Also, I have extensive, experience working with community skills, adaptive skills, social skills, all of those skills that neurotypical individuals kind of take for granted on a daily basis. Does anybody else wish to make their introductions? No? Okay. All right. Moving on. Mr. Ryan. There we go. Okay. So our agenda today is to review the why of what's going on. Identifying and establishing the motivation. That will help us get to what the individual may want, or what they may need, or what they may require. Understanding motivation helps us understand the why. So we can target replacement behaviors instead of yelling, screaming, kicking, hitting, lying, cheating, whatever the maladaptive behavior may look like. We try to instead of saying, no, you can't do that. We would ideally be like, okay, do this instead. Try to try to engage in functional communication, try to tell the truth, try to um, use your words for what you may want instead of grabbing or stealing or whatever it may be. um, what are the contingencies? You know, what happens afterwards? What can happen antecedently for the behavior for it to occur more likely, and then what is the contingency afterwards? What happens after you teach that replacement behavior? What happens after that replacement behavior is exhibited? Pre-teaching, that goes into the antecedent, or what happens before you see the behavior? What happened immediately before the behavior? If you see a child reaching for a candy bar in the store, you may want them to ask for the candy bar as opposed to grabbing it. And then providing reinforcement. Anytime that you target um, anytime that you target a replacement behavior, you want to reinforce that replacement behavior pretty often. That way it becomes in their repertoire of doing it. The more that we get reinforced for behaviors, the more likely it is we're going to do it. When we're trying to avoid events from occurring, then we're more likely not going to have them occur. Oh, look at that plane. Just as I'm talking. All right, Mr. Ryan, I'm ready to move forward. All right, the ABCs. Why? This is kind of a review of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. An antecedent, basically, all that is what happened. These are all complex kind of thoughts and principles of behavioral analysis, where people can spend their whole careers on any one of these slides that we're going to bring up. But so we're going to try to break it down as plainly as we can, and not as technical. But an antecedent is basically what happens right before a behavior occurs. And by behavior is anything that we say, see, do, hear, think, however we feel. It's anything that is observable outside, and how we feel inside. So what happens right before the behavior, and then there's the actual observable, what we can see as other people, the actual behavior, and then what happened as the consequence. Were they able to get what they wanted? Did they not get what they want? Did they get to not engage in something they didn't want to engage in? Did they have to follow through with what it was? And then all of that goes into identifying the functions. There's basically two main functions of behavior. One is escape, or avoiding negative things. Think of the seatbelt in your car just ding, 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 ding. You're more likely to buckle yourself up as a form of escaping that dinging noise. The other main function is access, and that's just access to something, access to an activity, access to a tangible. So those are the two main functions of behavioral analysis, and understanding those functions and how they relate to how often the individual gets that specific item, or how often that individual does not get that specific item. All right, moving forward, Mr. Ryan. All right, identifying and to create motivation. So, in my career, I have learned, and it takes a hot minute. It takes a very quick minute to understand and see how motivation plays into everyday life, and for students and for us as a whole. Seeing what a person wants in the moment is very key in understanding how to create successful behavior change, and what you can do in motivating individuals to engage in replacement behaviors, or behaviors that you see that are more acceptable or socially appropriate. some of the ways that we uh, can identify or create motivation is, asking the person simply straight up, what do you want? What are you wanting to work for? Let's say you're in this, I was working in the school district, and I was working with, someone that's, that just have some behavioral issues that a teacher may want to work on. I might write up a behavioral contract and be like, hey, if you're wanting X, Y, and Z at the end of the 9 weeks, how do we get there? Let's get your input on how we would be able to attain the goals that you're wanting to achieve. This is what happens if you do the things that are appropriate, and these are the things that happen when you don't do those things that are appropriate. Let's say we're working with an individual that, doesn't have the vocal ability to communicate or to express themselves as clearly or as, you know, uh, that other individual. So we're going to meet them on their level, whatever that looks like. You hold up two different things. Do you want A or B? Do you want C or D? And then move from there, and then use like a pre-MAC principle, which is basically first thing, grandma's rule. A lot of times I use that quite a bit. First, brush your teeth, then you can have an iPad, or first eat your dinner, then you can have dessert, or first do this worksheet, then we can go play. All those things, and then after you work in those first thens, then you can expand how much work is being done before, or how much acceptable behavior is occurring before whatever it is that individual may want or may need or escape from. So it's very, 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 very important to understanding motivation, creating motivations, and holding access to the reinforcement as a whole. All right, Mr. Ryan, moving forward. Thank you so much. Okay, provide a replacement behavior. As I've said numerous times, you're like, what is replace? What is replacement behavior? Replacement behavior is, to me, more often than not, replacement behaviors look like functional communication. They they are having the individual engage in something that is just as easy or easier than what they're doing currently to either get what they want or run away from what they don't want to do, is essentially what it is. And so that might look like just a child just being like, I don't want to do that, or no, not now, or I need a minute, or I need a break, or give me a second. Another replacement behavior I use for challenging behaviors a lot of time is some calming strategies. 3D breaths, squeezing hands, counting to 10 are all strategies that I try to use, with whatever learner's ability that I'm working with, because those are great skills to have in any person's life, is the ability to just take a second and realize that I'm really upset right now, but this moment will pass and I will get through it, as long as I just, take a second and breathe and work myself through it. So I try to work on replacement behaviors that focus on calming strategies, on vocal communication and verbal communication, to achieve the same desired outcome as what they are engaging in. So instead of crying and yelling to get the candy bar from the store shelf, asking for the candy bar. If I'm working with an individual that doesn't communicate very much using vocal communication or verbal communication, and they actually say, I want a candy bar, I'm going to go through the roof. I'm going to be super excited. I'm going to be doing backflips in the aisle with them as I give them all the candy bars. And it's important to reinforce those replacement behaviors as soon as they occur, as immediate as they happen. That way, those behaviors are more likely to happen in the future. It is so important. When I talk to parents and they say, you know, my child knows how to do this. I've seen him do this, you know, but have you seen him do it within a specific moment at a specific time? And were you right there reinforcing each and every time? That way the salience of that behavior increases throughout time, and that way you can start to fade that reinforcement. Sometimes you're going to have to reinforce over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, it takes, what is it, 29 days to create a new habit, or to start a new habit, you know. And a lot of times the individuals that we work with require a little bit more time and understanding, and that's okay. It's perfectly okay for them to have a little bit more time, and for us to give that understanding, for us to meet them on their level and then build them up. I think that's the most important thing, is just understanding where the learner is, whoever it may be, and then meeting them at their level, and then helping them work through different situations and different scenarios, whatever that may look like. So definitely reinforce replacement behaviors. Pretty passionate about it, but I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ryan. All right. Contingencies. All right. Contingency is the relationship between two events in order for them to blank. Oh, Miss Erica. Okay. Reinforcement and application. Behavior means action. Okay. So action meets consequence. This is exactly what we're talking about in behavior meets outcome guidelines or rules. Okay, first then, this is exactly what we've been talking about in previous slides, but it's just a little visual representation of how it may be easier for you to understand all the terminology, because it does come easier for behavioral analysts to just start talking about this, and it kind of gets lost along the wayside. Basically, all we need for contingency is like, what happened? What was the behavior? And then what happened immediately after the behavior? Did I get what I wanted, or did I get to leave what was scary or terrifying or hard for me to do, you know? Action, consequence, you know. Same with behavior and outcome. What happened? You know, if I'm in a dark house and I go to turn on a light, you know, what happened? Did the light come on? Am I more likely to do that in the future when it's dark? I'm going to turn on a light. It's the same thing. It's just understanding those guidelines and rules for when behavior should occur and when they should not occur. You know, stopping at a red light, you know, looking both ways before you cross a street. You know, what are the contingencies? What are the rules for doing what we need to do? And on this slide, there's first then also, which is grandma's rule, like we just discussed. You know, it's also called Premack principle, but that's a little nerdy. But all it is just, you know, first do an undesirable, is something that's something you don't really want to do in order for you to get the thing that you want. And you see this in everyday life with, you know, having a job. You know, not every day you want to go to work and do all the things you got to do, but at the end of that, you get a paycheck, or you get time off, or you get benefits, or you get all the warm fuzzies from doing your job at the end of the day, or whatever that may look like. So first then happens all the time, you know, and to create all these, we have a whole bunch of tools at our disposal. And over the years, as you become familiar with, you know, the different techniques within behavioral analysis, and they're changing constantly all the time, and becoming more salient, more accepted, readily used in everyday life, the more that, you know, you start to apply it in all facets of your life. All right, moving forward.
One thing
And
I
being
wanted to
consistent.
mention, one thing I wanted to
Go ahead.
chime in and mention about that, because I know it's a big concern a lot with parents, is that they feel like when they're implementing first, you can first do this or use this appropriate behavior, then you can have this item, this activity, that they feel like they're bribing their children. And so I just want to make sure to clarify that bribery is when you are offering them something before they do something that you want to see from them. So if you said, okay, I'll give you this candy bar, but then you have to clean your room, and you give it to them before, there's no motivation afterwards for them to clean it. Similarly to the example of, you know, going to work and getting paid. If you got paid before, you'd certainly be less likely to put in a lot of effort into your job unless you love your job like we do. And so just keep that in mind, that setting those boundaries and setting up a reinforcement system is not the same as bribing. And so, you know, it's really, really important to have those things in place to see that behavior change and to be implementing it consistently. And so it's okay to say, okay, you can get this candy bar, but first I need you to go clean your room. And then when they do that, they get that reward. So I feel like I just wanted to bring that up, because not only with parents that I work with, but also my friends who have children, they tend to feel like they're bribing their kids, and, oh, I'm a bad mom because I'm bribing my kids to do these things. But you're actually just setting really healthy relationships with the work, and getting a reward. So we wouldn't work without getting paid. They're not going to work without getting some sort of reinforcement.
Yeah, I
That's
think that,
something that sometimes like fades out as you quote establish expectations and routines and things like that. So something will become a habit for the child, and then you move on to something else that you use if then.
It can become habit. It can become, a lot of times we see that with social skills, in that a lot of times students maybe who are on the autism spectrum aren't reinforced by social interaction, and they kind of have to learn. And so you pair that with something more tangible that they like a food item or a preferred toy, and then over time that can be faded out, and they kind of learn that social interaction is reinforcing enough in itself. Or you can have systems in place where you start fading how frequently they're getting reinforcement, but I wouldn't recommend doing that right out the bat. You want to establish consistent, appropriate behavior. So, you know, like they were talking about earlier with, you know, a behavior contract, that's going to be something where it's like, okay, at the end of the 9 weeks, you're going to get this, you know, if you do these things. So that's a very thin schedule of reinforcement, where they're not getting reinforced until the end of that 9 weeks. And that's something that you can definitely build up to. So you could say, okay, if you clean, or if you make your bed every day this week, well, let me say it this way. Maybe you start with, if you make your bed, then you get $1. And then you change that over time. Once they're doing that consistently, you say, okay, if you make your bed every day this week, you can have $1 at the end of the week. And so you can fade back that reinforcement, but it depends. Some children might need some sort of reinforcement set up for their whole lives. And that's okay. It's about making sure that it makes sense for their environment and the people who work with them and live with them, and what works for your family, and how does that fit into your daily lives. It's not always feasible to reinforce super densely for very long. So then they can work on fading that back.
That's perfect. I think that's a perfect example. Also, right now I'm working with some students, just to give an example, who were barely able just to make it inside of the classroom. Now they're, you know, I started out with them sitting at their desk, you know, making it super fun for them sitting at their desk, bringing whatever reinforcer, you know, toys or fun games, and you know, me just being super energetic for them sitting at their desk. And then it was them doing their first worksheet, them, you know, standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance and doing the whole morning routine within that school environment that the teacher has set up for them. And now that and then reinforcing, you know, thinning, as Ms. Cook said, thinning that reinforcement schedule to where they don't get reinforcement until after the entire morning routine has been completed, has been very successful. But it starts off with a very dense schedule of reinforcement. You know, them having access to all the favorite things all the time, to them having access to all their favorite things part of the time, you know, to them having access to all their favorite things a little bit less of the time, and just, you know, building that ability to do the things that do not come easy for them is huge in creating a larger repertoire of skills. And it helps with, you know, everyday life of, you know, not always getting what you want when you want it, how you want it, but you definitely do not want to start off with a thinner schedule of reinforcement, if at all possible, depending on where you're going to meet the child or the learner where they're at, and that's perfectly okay. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. All right, okay, so, and moving on to this slide. So pre-teaching, it's just all pre-teaching is kind of setting up expectations. You can be like, okay, if you know, what do we need? Let's say they're coming home, and to give Miss Cook's example of making their bed or cleaning their room before they can do X, Y, or Z. So pre-teaching, like as they're in the car, you know, or just before they walk into the house, being like, hey, don't forget, we should probably clean our room because we can get X, Y, or Z for doing our afternoon routine of cleaning our room. You know, it's just setting that expectation, explaining what the expectation is, and then, you know, teaching it out, explaining it out for them. Sometimes pre-teaching looks like actually, you know, going with them and doing things hand over hand, and modeling it for them, or doing it with them, you know, and then having them try to do it independently, whether it's brushing teeth, making their bed, you know, doing any kind of schoolwork, making a sandwich or making a meal, you know, just pre-teaching those expectations, and then having them try to be as independent as they're capable of. And I think that's huge. And it's just kind of like, oh, hey, a heads up, like this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm expecting for you to do, and this is how you get all the things.
I think Chris froze for some reason. Maybe he'll come back.
I'm back.
Oh, there he
Can you
goes.
see me now?
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So moving forward, Mr. Ryan. Did Ryan freeze? All right, here we go. All right, reinforcement of appropriate behavior. And basically, like, let's say you have a reinforcement schedule that has been hello? Am I here?
Yep.
Okay, good. You got it? Okay, so basically it's catching them being good. So like, let's say we have a We have a behavior, we have a definition of a behavior that we want to there's other behaviors that we're not even targeting, but they're related to that behavior. A good example would be, you know, saying hello to saying hello first. Side effect of that behavior is, you know, looking at the individual, you know, and saying hello. Let's say that happens and you're like, oh my gosh, great job saying hello. Also, look at how you use such great eye contact. I love that you're looking at me right now. I love how you're communicating with me about your day, or, you know, just catch an individual being good, reinforce all the things that they're doing that are good. You know, let's say you're working with an individual that has a hard time sitting, but they're just sitting in their chair. The individuals that exhibit maladaptive behaviors, they exhibit those maladaptive behaviors so they can access attention or access, you know, all the things that they want. So, and when they are engaging in calm, normal behavior or quiet behavior, they kind of get knowledge that have to express, you know, all the things that they're doing right. That way, when we do come, not constantly being like, oh, we only come in for the negative things, we only come in for all of the bad things, you know, be seen as a source of reinforcement, as a source of excitement, as a source of fun. All right. And you want to do it as often, just like everything else, you want to do it as often as possible. Please. Oh my gosh. It's so bright.
Thanks for being patient, guys. I think we have a little bit of a connection problem with Christopher.
Oh.
Can you hear us, Chris?
I can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's just been quite a bit of connection slowdown, but we are hanging in. So we'll do the best we can.
Yes, ma'am. All right, moving forward, Mr. Ryan, if you can. All right, questions and discussions?
I think one of the things that really hit me the most is the independence. Because I feel like it's really empowering for a kid to do things like when they catch on to something, you say you reinforce of just how much it feels good for them to accomplish something and be independent on it. Does that, instead of feeding them so much at a time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. And like, I think it's really important that, you know, at least from most individuals that I doing as much independently as they can handle, like really boosts self-esteem and self-confidence for themselves. And I think that's really important. Like, just as we're increasing behaviors, we're also increasing their want and need.
So are exhibiting that challenging behavior, and I mean, let's be honest, as a parent, it's super frustrating, particularly when you feel like you've worked on it forever, you know? So what are some strategies, or what's the main thing we can remember to just kind of tell us in our brain to encourage us to keep moving forward.
It's just a step-by-step process. Understand where you want to go, and then just breaking it up into small individual steps of how you're going to get there. You know, I mean, and you can break everything down into small little steps, as small can be, you know, and if that's what the individual needs to be successful, then that's what they need, and that's fine, and that's okay. But just know that you're working towards progress, and it's not always going to be a line that just goes whew, like a there's some lulls, and then there's a big success, and then there's a little bit of a lull, and then there's an even bigger success, but still a little bit of a lull. I mean, it's kind of to be expected, you know, just like us, you know, just like any adult I've ever met in my life, you know, kids, you know, have the same things. They have good days and they have bad days, you know, and, you know, just understanding that, and just understanding that, you know, they're doing is important to remember, and remembering that grace and understanding goes a long way, and not only in this field, but with anybody that you come in contact with, I feel like.
That is so, so true. Grace and patience and understanding would be very important in our working with our kids. And so thank you so much for that. I think that, you know, if I could finish it off by saying, I think it's really important to also know and make sure that what you're working on with your child is age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you could address on that, on maybe seeing like what a parent says, I can't believe my child did that. And I'm thinking, well, I've said that a lot as a parent too, so I get it. But sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, she is just 14 or she is just 5 or whatever the age, and that's a hard skill for that age. So how do you help keep things realistic?
So as far as age appropriateness goes, I mean, there are age appropriate behaviors for, so, you know, to be socially incorporated into, you know, a community, you know, and that's important to think about. But also age appropriate behaviors, all that really means is how many times you've gone around the sun, you know, and that looks different for different people. You know, it looks different for the life experiences that each individual has had. And I think that's kind of where I was talking about, you know, meeting the individual on their level, and whatever that looks like. What is acceptable for one person may not be as acceptable for another person that could be the same exact age. It just depends on meeting the learner where they're at. Obviously, you would, you know, like the individual to be as independent and as, you know, self-sufficient as they possibly can be, but sometimes, you know, they just need a little assistance, and that's okay, whatever that assistance looks like.
I would say as well to collaborate with your team, because sometimes it can be difficult and we have a lot of high expectations. But you know, if you know, collaborate with your teacher, your student's teacher. If they're receiving different services through Northwest, collaborate with those different services. If they're receiving outside ABA, occupational therapy, speech therapy, anything like that, collaborate and you know, find out what the expectations should be. You know, ask them, am I being realistic in my expectations of this student at this time? I think that sometimes, like you're saying, parents kind of forget, and I do feel like a lot of times in my experience, children with special education needs get put on almost a higher platform because of the support systems. And it's, you know, I find myself reminding people, well, that's just behaviors that you see of any typical middle schooler, you know. Okay, so they got a little sassy with their teacher. I mean, that happens, you know. How would you, you know, reminding them, how would you handle that behavior with you know, a general education student with a neurotypical student, but having those people who are a support system for you and help can kind of give some fresh perspective on expectations. Is that something that they are capable of doing, that teachers or other professionals have seen them do in their settings, in their school settings, in their clinical settings, but they're not just, you know, but when you see this behavior, or you're wanting an appropriate behavior and you're not seeing it, are they seeing it too? And it's just not generalizing to your environment. You know, are these behaviors that you're seeing, are they common across all environments of them, with them, or whatnot? So utilizing the team around you can be really, really beneficial in determining, you know, what are appropriate expectations for them at that time. Is that something that is a behavior that needs to be worked on, or is that something that give them a little slack for? So
I completely agree with that. Also, the collaboration helps in general with consistency. You know, consistency. If one individual is expecting one expectation, but, you know, somebody else on the team is expecting another expectation, you know, and you guys aren't seeing eye to eye, it probably leaves the individual like kind of confused on, you know, what they need to do to, you know, get the things that they want or need, or how to even get the things that they want or need. I think that's, you know, really important as well. Like being on the same page with your spouse, being on the same page with your teachers, being on the same page with the therapist and the speech and the OT. That way everybody understands what is going on and how to better help this individual within certain situations. You know, what are the expectations, and, you know, how do we move forward, because those expectations are going to change as that individual acquires more skills, more independence, more awareness about what's going on, more language, more everything. You know, life is a learning journey for each and every one of us. And so I think it's important to realize that the expectations also need to, you know, change as, you know, our experience changes.
Mhm.
So,
That is so true. Well, do we have any other questions or thoughts out there? Feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we will encourage you to, yeah, we love feedback. So you can go to the district's nisdtx.org/PE for parent education and find the some information there about what we are trying to do with our parenting education, which is simply partnering together for sure to provide resources that will help us, you know, have the strategies to, you know, help our kids grow and develop. So I'd love to hear, as I think forward into next year, anybody's thoughts as to what you would like to see available for parents. But again, we thank you for joining us. Chris, thank you so much. Ryan, thank you. Mary, thanks for joining us and being there to provide some feedback too. Chris, is there anything else you'd want to leave us with?
No, if anybody has any questions, Ryan's in the Fort Worth area, and I know he'd be happy to help. If you have any questions, more than happy to, you know, reach out to me if at all possible also. And thank you guys so much for everything. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you guys and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.